How's it going, Doom Patrollers? Welcome to my Season 3, Episode 5, Dada Patrol recap, breakdown, and review. And this episode, I know I keep saying this about springboarding us to the next part, or whatever, but I truly do feel that Episode 5 really has done that in terms of getting us into that next chapter. Just think about the way it ended. We finally got Rita going to wherever the hell she's going. I cannot wait for that. But another aspect to this episode that I was very pleasantly surprised by, and I suppose this gives a little bit of a shortcut to my opinion on the Sisterhood of Dada, is that, to put it very bluntly, and I'm sure maybe quite a few people feel the same way, in how with Season 3 and how it was marketed and whatnot, obviously the Sisterhood of Dada were big parts of the trailers and stuff, but I was really taken back by the Brotherhood of Evil, and I was very excited to see them come to the screen, and I know we're going to see more of them, but when it came to the Sisterhood of Dada, it's not that I wasn't excited, I just thought, well, I want to see the Brotherhood of Evil more, and I'll just put that to the side and see it when I see it. But with this episode, when we got a whole episode about them, I found every single member very captivating. I found them very compelling. I just found them a lot cooler than I ever thought they would be. So I'm really looking forward to see how their plan for the eternal flagellation comes to fruition, how that's going to affect the Doom Patrol. And yeah, with Rita now traveling back in time, really, like, the rest of this season after this episode feels like it's just going to be crazy. So, other than that, guys, let's get into this breakdown. I'd really appreciate a like, which, before I forget, by the way, I should be having an interview very, very soon with the writer of this episode. And as you guys know, we love this show so much. So for me, getting an opportunity to pick the brain of one of the amazing writers, Shoshana Sachi, I believe she is an executive story editor on Doom Patrol. I do apologize if I've somehow butchered that, but regardless, this was her solo episode. So if you have any questions pertaining specifically to episode 5, this episode, whether it's what ideas that she came up with to kind of make things happen in this episode, maybe her experience as a writer and whatnot, I would love to pick some fan questions, if you know what I mean, to include on top of some of my questions. So keep an eye out for that on the channel. There should be a post on my community tab by the time this video releases, but of course you can post some questions down in the comments below. I'll be keeping an eye out for some of them. So look forward to that, guys. And other than that, let's get into this breakdown. So this episode picks up with, and I love the music choices on this show. That is something that always hit me in the feels. But of course, My Chemical Romance, and as you guys know, Gerard Way has written Doom Patrol, so this couldn't be more perfect. This is when we take a bit of a dive into the underground. And honestly, what I love so much about this episode is I feel like there was so much going on, and I love how Doom Patrol, and I'm going to keep going into these tangents, but they just managed to achieve so much in so many sectors within a single episode that doesn't screw up the pacing. And to pick this episode up with that little teaser of Kay kind of growing up, and I know this has been teased obviously throughout this season already, but this episode, it really does take the next leap. So initially we have Jane checking in on Kay, who seems to be in somewhat of a therapy session. This is where I start to worry about a few things, because we have the therapist saying there are rules in this place. The underground is a delicate ecosystem and brash decisions affect us all. But as Jane says, this is her body, everything here is hers. So if she wants to go up, but that's when, you know, the therapist then says, but she's a little girl, she cannot make these decisions alone. And what I kind of like with what they're playing with here is that it could come across as though the personalities are fearing for them maybe being a bit irrelevant. And I look at this kind of in a Toy Story way. If you guys have seen all the Toy Story movies, you probably know what I'm going to get into here, with how Andy and then his sister grew up and didn't necessarily need the toys anymore after Kay has healed, so to speak. I'm not saying she's 100% healed, but you get where I'm going with this. After we had Miranda, the kind of icon or avatar of depression, Kay's depression, destroyed, at least, you know, for some time, that means she's able to maybe get past and grow into her own and be the primary, aka the OG personality once again. But I think that is sending the other personalities into a bit of fear, or at least that's what it comes across like. But they're also giving us the perspective of maybe we don't want her to go into this too quick, because it could also also potentially really backfire. Maybe something happens that frightens her down and regresses potentially a lot of her mental health development. I don't know which side to land on. It honestly could be that the personalities are fearing for their own existence if Kay does grow to such a point where she no longer needs them. Either way, I'm very sucked into that storyline, and Jane is very, very suspicious herself. Meanwhile, though, we have Cliff being hooked up to some Parkinson's pills. Also, notice how there was a little missing girl poster on the milk carton, I believe, and that was the very girl who played Rita, like the Blob, in that play. It is quite funny to see Cliff commenting on social media and just, you know, seeing these pop-ups, which does make me intrigued, by the way. That pop-up thing was such a deliberate thing, if that makes sense. So much so that they brought it up again at the end, and we had Cliff look left to right, and he clicked on it. So there must be a repercussion to that, surely. I mean, I could be looking into this too deeply, but let me know if you think anything funny from Cliff. Clicking on that pop-up at the end of the episode will come of it. In this moment, Cyborg's grid comes back online thanks to Silas, because it was revealed to him in a moment after this that he's basically going above and beyond to risk his own job to, you know, disable the security parameters that were put into place. We get a couple of more touching moments here, just kind of escalating Cyborg's storyline between him and his father even more, through where he says that he's sorry he never wanted to be the kind of dad who pushes his son down some kind of preconceived path. And this obviously goes back to the confrontation that Cyborg had after learning from his mother in the afterlife. It's so weird me saying these things out loud sometimes, but it's Doom Patrol, that there was potentially another way to save him. So, and I really do, and it's so nice seeing in the comments as well that a lot of people are resonating with what I feel, that the Dravan Wade Cyborg scenes with his father and whatnot are very, very, very strong. And just a little teaser, the Cyborg scenes with Frenzy, the guy with the freaking bicycle wheels in his back, well, once again, I think arguably my favorite takeaway moments and scenes from this episode. Back to Cliff, since Cyborg ran away because he wanted to figure out what was going on with his grid coming back. Cliff was left to his own devices, so to speak, and he put a bunch of pills in a little funnel that feeds his brain. Meanwhile, we have Rita in a little hazmat-y kind of suit, and I just find Rita hilarious in any freaking situation, so of course, her in a hazmat suit is funny to me. But anyway, she's looking at Larry's body, or should I say his little hernia or tumor, and I didn't speculate about the pregnancy thing last week because I felt like that was maybe too spoilery from what I saw in this episode, so that's why I said I would save my thoughts on that till this week's episode. But it turns out that you guys were already speculating about that last week, so I probably should have. But that's how cautious I am to make sure I don't give anything away from episodes that I've seen in the future. But as I said, this was the final episode I've seen up to. Initially, from what we're seeing here, is that it's nothing really to worry about because it looks like it's disappeared. But that is when Rita sees the little tumory thing moving around Larry's head, and I felt like this was kind of a funny, it wasn't probably a deliberate reference, but at least my takeaway is we have Brendan Fraser on the show. He's been in The Mummy, and one thing, the first thing that came to my mind when I saw that thing moving under his skin was like a little scarab beetle from the Mummy movies. I remember when I was a kid, I loved The Mummy, like a lot of us did, and those scarab scenes of when you saw it moving under the skin always creeped me out, and I don't know, it just reminded me of that in this moment. Just to keep it cohesive, I do want to jump into what I think and what we are all speculating about here with regards to little Larry? Is that what we're calling the thing now? So jumping to the cart right at the end when Larry is nursing his son Paul, which is something quite unexpected this episode, his little lump on the back in where they were thinking it was a zit earlier on in the bus starts glowing blue. So yes, it does seem as though in a very Doom Patrol way, Larry Traynor is pregnant with a little negative baby. I guess it could be little Larry or negative baby, I don't know, but either way, I think this is absolutely brilliant. There are a couple of directions where I could maybe seeing it go. A few of you were commenting saying, I wonder if it's going to go in this direction or that direction with regards to Larry, such as I think a couple of you mentioned Rebis or Rebis. Now, I don't... You could say that this could be a take on that, but I don't think it's going to be done in the exact same way where he becomes one with not only the negative spirit, but somebody else as well. I don't think somebody else is just going to come up and he's going to be like three beings in one person. I think this, you could take factors from that story, but as I always say with innovation, maybe they're going to borrow little factors from that story, but maybe the negative spirit left Larry, well, quite clearly here, a little negative baby. But I do still find that kind of sad. Obviously, we have no idea where this is going, but does that mean we're never going to see the OG negative spirit again? But it is still quite sweet and poetic that he left a little part of himself, maybe, with Larry. I don't know what happened in order to make this happen. I do wonder. That's kind of really strange to imagine, but either way, we could be in for an absolutely hilarious journey with Larry, who, you know, has gotten to know a bit of the negative spirit already, but with a baby coming, like a little negative baby who also needs to learn about what he is and, you know, what the negative spirit has learned about the world, but now this negative baby also kind of needs to learn all the same things. Are we going to see, like, Father Larry? I don't know. There's just so many ideas, but I am so here for it. This is when really things start kicking because Madame Rouge calls a team meeting. I like the little Doctor Who reference from Jane saying, hey, Doctor Who and whatnot, and I just love how throughout this whole serious conversation that Madame Rouge is trying to have, because, you know, with the parts of her mission that she vaguely remembers, she knows that the Sisterhood is fairly bad. Cliff and Jane are just acting like two kids in a class who can't quite pay attention to the teacher. But Laura de Mille brings up that from the events in the past with the Doom Patrol and how they kind of screwed over the Bureau of Normalcy and how, you know, at the ant farm, all the cells were busted wide open. Well, it turns out that the Sisterhood of Dada were actually in prison there and they have escaped. So I like how this is connected to that way back then, and she wants the Doom Patrol to find them and kill them. I like how Larry brings up something which I'm very interested in, kind of in of itself, and this speaks to the larger part of this episode, I suppose, with what we can take away from the Sisterhood of Dada. He mentioned something very specific in how they were all prisoners of the ant farm, and they're not bad people, like the Doom Patrol. Larry's not a bad person. So what makes Laura de Mille so sure that the Sisterhood of Dada are bad people? And that's one thing I do wonder. They could obviously be bad with this eternal flagellation that they're trying to bring about, which does look to be some kind of, you know, wiping the slate clean of the world and then starting anew. And as always, usually with bad guys, the worst of them are the kind of people who believe that they're doing the right thing. Do you see where I'm going with this? They might think that their mission with the eternal flagellation is something that is only beneficial for the world. So it is an interesting thing that I felt like this line was written in here that Larry brings up. Are they inherently bad people? Because the way they came across in this episode, apart from Byron Shelley, she came across a bit more calculating. The others didn't seem evil, but obviously we still have yet to see where things go. And I do wonder, I have so many questions, like, because in the comics, the Brotherhood of Dada, I was about to say the Brotherhood of Evil, were gathered by Mr. Nobody. Like, he went around and somewhat recruited them, if you will, each member. Now, I wonder if in this iteration, since I doubt we're getting Alan Tudyk this season, maybe they will reference to the past and how he did collect them, but since he went missing, they kind of were just trapped in the ant farm and he never saved them. I don't know. Maybe he has nothing to do with them in this iteration. So I have no idea if they've got anything to do with Mr. Nobody, but clearly this iteration is ever so slightly different with regards to a few things, so let's just assume that Mr. Nobody has nothing to do with them. Their change and need for the change in the world was somewhat teased in this episode, and I feel like it does come from a good place in their minds. But obviously I think the Doom Patrol and many other people will have something to say about their plan. Now, what is Dada, or the Dada movement, or the Sisterhood of Dada? Well, Rita does explain how it's an insufferable thing that the French came up with so they can make crude nudie films and call it art. And, you know, we do get little teasers, and, you know, I'm new to this as well, the Dada art movement, if you will. And, you know, I've Googled it, and what is the Dada movement? Well, it says here that the Dada was an art movement formed during the First World War in Zurich in negative reaction to the horrors and folly of the war. The art, poetry, and performance produced by Dada artists is often satirical and nonsensical in nature. Now, we do get some more information from Madame Rouge saying that there were messages left behind in their cells saying that the eternal flagellation is coming. There's a little insignia or somewhat logo of the Sisterhood of Dada. That was the same one that was kind of put on that film that Madame Rouge and Rita found, and these are popping up in cities all around the world. So it looks like they are recruiting, and I'm wondering if they're just recruiting for people to join their cause, and those people will survive whatever the eternal flagellation is. And that word, honestly, I feel like this episode, again, like you can derive so many meanings from various different things, but it's so deep on some levels. I feel like some of the things are flying over my head. I'm trying to figure it out. Like the definition of flagellation. How does that speak to the larger plan of what the Sisterhood are up to? I would love your takeaways as well. Like, trust me, like I've tried to like ponder it a bit, but I bet that there's tons of people in the comments who will have their own theories as to what exactly that means and what the Sisterhood are really striving to do. Also, just another thing I want to point out, just with the way that Madame Rouge is somewhat like articulating all of this and how she says, you know, striking evidence of a global conspiracy. Well, one that I feel really stupid, to be honest, because one of you guys commented, I do apologize, I don't exactly remember the name, but when I was talking about how Niles Calder, you know, gave her the document, the letter that says, you know, he recommends her to be terminated, I was thinking that meant killed or something, but you guys pointed out in how terminated just could mean fired. So she could have worked with Niles at the Bureau of Normalcy or Oddities at the time, and that could be why, with whatever she got involved in at the Bureau around the time of Niles, could lead to how he has such disdain for her. Maybe they worked together at that point in time and they grew close. That would be true to the comics as well, because, you know, you add all these other clues up with how she thinks of Niles, she feels this overwhelming sense to punch him in the face. Sure, that could be written off as a joke, but that could be something she does intuitively remember from whatever fallout they had, if they were indeed, well, both working for the Bureau at the time. So thank you for pointing that out. I was looking too deeply into it, but yes, terminated could very well just mean that she was fired from the Bureau, then maybe joined the Sisterhood. Maybe they came across the Sisterhood of Dada whilst Niles and her were working at the Bureau, but she got sucked in to join their group. There's all kinds of little rabbit hole theories we could go down into here. So since the Doom Patrol went and killed them, well, they're just going to infiltrate them and pretend to join them, which led us into that next part of the episode where things just get really crazy. Like, it's such a subtle introduction to them, but as I said, with the way it was presented this episode, we don't get all the answers, and that just offers one thing that I feel just this season encompasses for me, and that is intrigue. Further and further and further intrigue. But before we do get into that though, we do have Rita being showed that film in where she is recording. And I feel like an idiot yet again, you guys pointed out, because I was like, what was she doing? But yes, she does seem to be the one with the very, very old-fashioned cameras where you do have to keep kind of rotating it to film it. I do really enjoy the pairing this episode of Rita and Madame Rouge just kind of getting drunk and, you know, just dealing with their kind of loss of what to do. So they, you know, end up drinking a bunch of martinis or whatever, and that, you know, provides for some very funny scenes. You can really tell just how torn up Madame Rouge is through what Niles said. We've already kind of been over this at the end of the previous episode, but her not knowing who she is, yet learning this about whoever she was, is definitely somewhat world-shattering for her. At least that's the impression I get. And also, Rita, in this moment, reveals the very part that she stole off the time machine. But before we resume that, towards the end of this episode, of course, we have to catch up with the Doom Patrol in the Doom bus. This almost ends up in a crash, but luckily that is narrowly avoided, and they arrive in this somewhat fog, and that is quite literally because of Byron Shelley's The Fog. Meanwhile, though, we have Cliff being high as anything because of, like, all the drugs that he took are these somewhat dopamine stimulators. I mean, for crying out loud, he was tripping out, seeing all kinds of things, like a freaking self-cycling bicycle, which was talking about, like, a toad bonnet bee, freaking Margaret Thatcher's bum, and then, like, some weird-ass shape that was just laughing at him in the sky. Yeah, I please do this again. So Cliff, after just going straight off into the fog, comes across Sleepwalk, and if you didn't know already, she is a character who has super strength, but only when she's asleep. In fact, so much so that she has to take certain pills so she stays asleep in order to actually use that power. I have no idea how she actually navigates around when she's unconscious, but either way, this wasn't his actual Sisterhood of Dada member he interacts with, though, because he opens the freaking back of the bus or ice cream van or whatever it is, and a portal with the quiz just pops up, and he gets sucked into that. Talk about trippy episode. And the quiz, if you didn't know already, she's somewhat of a, I guess you could say, germaphobe, which is why I guess she's in that little kind of glass chamber, and she has that gas mask and stuff from the comics. I believe from the comics as well, she does have like question marks similar to that of like a Riddler suit. But I do love the way they've really accurately portrayed these characters. But, you know, one thing, speaking of that, is the larger question. You know, they've changed it from Brotherhood of Dada to Sisterhood. But to be honest, I think everyone is very accurately who they are in the comics. I think the only difference, I mean, I could be wrong with this, is actually Byron Shelley. I believe that's a gender flip situation, similar to the Sisterhood of Dada. This is what I meant about taking out the like extra level of meanings through what the Sisterhood of Dada members are saying, because for example with Cliff, we have the question from the quiz saying, what are you? And he's just saying, you know, I'm a robot. But then, you know, as we get further and further throughout the episode with each character, initially it's like, who are you? To Cyborg, or why are you? With Cliff, what are you? You know, it's simple answer, I'm a robot. But then there's deeper meanings that come out of it that they somewhat get both antagonized. I feel with Cliff, though, he does get a bit, he was like one of the few members to probably introspectively figure out, not necessarily figure out, but get into the question of what was actually being asked. But I think my favorite scenes were with Jane and Cyborg's experience with the fog and Frenzy. So with Jane, she was wandering around for a bit and she heard Hammerhead's voice and whatnot, because they're trying to reach out to her because they're probably freaking out what situation Jane has got herself into. And this is when Jane wanders into a candy store of sorts, and we learn from the fog herself that she knows about the underground, because this is the thing about her character. She can more or less release this foggy cloud that can not only absorb people, which she goes on to detail later with what the ant farm used her for, but in this situation I think she's kind of using her fog and psychedelic cloud, if you will, to put all of the Doom Patrol into somewhat of a mindscapey trip. I mean, Cliff is on a literal trip, but everyone else is more or less somewhat under her control, you could say. And it does very much so interest me that she, or Jane, should I say, is the one that she wanted to talk to. She's the one who interests Byron Shelley herself the most. And I do definitely think that there's some kind of attraction going on here. For example, there were just, you know, plenty of moments where she would kind of, in a seductive sort of way, you know, caress Jane's hand and stuff. Or, you know, when she offered Jane to indulge in something sweet, she kind of like would pull away her collar from her neck as if like she was, you know, inferring herself. I feel like they somewhat dig each other, and I feel like also with what Jane, one of the final moments was before the other personality started breaking through, she also once again took Byron Shelley's hand. And that's because obviously at that point she was saying some things that related to Jane, like, you know, doing something with your pain. I did wonder initially, like, why would Jane kind of like listen to this though? Like, but why? And it could just be the somewhat attraction that is clearly a little bit of an undertone in this scene. But once again, to take it back to the whole trip that everyone is going on, it's the question. And with Jane, it was, who are you? Jane does poke into what the hell is the Sisterhood of Dada, and what are you planning? What is the eternal flagellation? We get some clues with how Byron Shelley says it's a vulture cleaning the carcass of an overfed sow, and a powdered donut sinking into an outhouse pit. And it's just, yeah, I like the reference to like the Dada, the whole thing concept in general, with Jane clapping back saying that's some art house school pretentious level bullshit. And this is what I mean. The way the Sisterhood of Dada are playing it this episode is very ambiguous, and it kind of makes me feel a bit stupid, if I'm being honest, because I'm trying to really get into like reading between the lines, but I still find it quite ambiguous. So if you guys have any takeaways with any of the very ambiguous lines that the Sisterhood of Dada are giving this episode, and obviously that's their whole purpose, they kind of want the Doom Patrol to somewhat figure out the who you are, why am I thing of all of this, and teasing the eternal flagellation and why it's so necessary. Such ambiguity there, but I can't wait for that curtain to be somewhat pulled to the side so we can really see what the end game is. We also saw that Kay Chalice was in there, and you can take away quite a few things with this, because when the personalities like Hammerhead started bashing on the window, that is when the fog said, you can tune them out if you want, Jane, you're letting them overpower you. Are they afraid for the girl or of the girl? And that's when I was like, ooh, you know, and it's true, but we still don't know. I don't see where this is going to go in the long run, because if Kay is already getting to a point of development where she wants to take over, well then why would she ever need somebody else to take over, and where will this go in Doom Patrol in future seasons? We did have Jane say, you know, I get it, you've been wronged and now you want to burn the whole world down, and we do have the fog saying sometimes you have to set worlds on fire so you can make something anew. it's still ambiguous. Like, obviously, I don't think they're going to literally set the world on fire, but what is their larger plan? I mean, obviously, with, you know, the Sisterhood of Dada, the movement, it's kind of fighting back, and I think, you know, somewhat getting rid of this status quo that is the world, and this kind of goes into the Lloyd, or should I say, Frenzy quote to Cyborg, where he says, you know, he spent a near century in the ant farm cell, and he returned to Lazarus, you know, to see the world the same. I mean, I'm sure I butchered that quote, but it's, once again, he was somewhat disgusted to see how the world was exactly the same before he went in there to after he went in there. So they obviously want to, like, completely ruin the state of things that they don't agree with in maybe a capitalistic sense or whatever. But as I was teasing throughout this review, I think my favorite scene was with Frenzy, and he's played by Miles Massenden. I hope I didn't butcher his name, probably did, but I just felt like he was so captivating. And he's Lloyd Malcolm Jefferson, and he has the ability to literally become a cyclone, so I really hope we do get to see that action in the show. Like, Doom Patrol doesn't always go head over heels into action, and neither do they need to, but I do wonder how and if they will literally adapt that, and we do get to see him, like, unleash his power. That would be really awesome. We got a tease of that from Sleepwalk with her strength, and like punching Cliff through the little glass chamber, but yeah, can't wait to see this. But as I was saying, I feel like one of the best scenes, or the best scene of this episode, is when, you know, we had that music in the background. I think you could hear the strings or the cello as things were getting really tense between Jovan Wiggs, Cyborg, and Frenzy here. Initially, he was asking the why are you, and, you know, this definitely does, you know, further process the theme of identity this season. You know, why are you? And Cyborg thinks he has it dialed down initially. He's like, well, why am I? I am because the world needs justice and order. I am because I want to serve and protect. And that is the very surface level. That isn't, it's a similar thing to what Cliff said to Cyborg a few episodes ago as well. Like, your Cyborg aspect isn't you. Like, do you know what I mean? And that's, once again, what Cyborg is answering with here. But it's like, why are you? Like, why are you? And that's why I liked them getting into that intricate detail. And even though it got a bit touchy, especially at that point of where there was this precipice, as if they were going to break through with something, up until Cliff stupidly dropped Laura de Mille's name, which kind of ended this whole thing. But I do feel like this scene was the most captivating, and I think Frenzy here really turned Cyborg's world upside down, because I don't think I've seen Vic this angry in a long time on the show, especially when he came marching back into Doom Manor. But I would love to know, who was your favorite Sisterhood of Dada interaction between the characters this episode, how this links into the larger picture, Madame Rouge, the film recording, how that ties into, like, the Brotherhood of Evil. It's still, this is what I mean, I feel like the most ambiguous Doom Patrol season yet. Anyway, they all wake up on the bus, which makes me think, were they on the bus the whole time? But then again, how would Larry get Paul? Because Paul was there, and that's quite sad to see, especially with, oh my god, it just makes me remember, like, the scenes of last season when we learned that Paul became the person he did, and the way he views Larry is nuts. And I didn't actually think we would continue that storyline. I thought that was going to be Larry estranged indefinitely from his family, but looks like he might have a chance to reconcile with Paul now. But the reason why I'm laughing there is, but he's got a freaking baby. Is he gonna have to explain that to his son? And I think this is why I enjoyed this episode so much. In the very scene where everyone returns, they're more or less deflated. I think they went in there thinking, oh, this is gonna kind of be easy, because they went in there hoping that they would get rid of Laura de Mille and whatnot, so they were very up for it. But then they just walked into a situation that I don't think they ever expected. Similar to me in how I went into this, expecting to enjoy, obviously, the Sisterhood of Dada, but not to be taken so aback by the presence that they bring. That's my biggest takeaway from this episode, is that I'm so grateful that the setup of these characters and the castings are so fantastic. So Rita was obviously very optimistic that would be some semblance of something to go off, but no, they returned really deflated. Cyborg is just like, F this, F Laura de Mille, F everything. Like, he's really done, and in a bit of a identity crisis, I would say, more so than anyone. I feel like Cyborg right now is at the peak of his identity crisis this season. I thought it was really cool to also leave him with the mask that says on the inside, Approximate Man. That is like just rubbing salt in the wound even more. Now, with the closing scenes of this episode, of a few of which we spoke earlier on in the review, we do also have Jane go back to the, you know, Kay Chalice's bedroom, but a few of the personalities are standing guard by the looks of it. It looks like they're just standing there, but no, you may as well say it's like they're guarding the room, preventing Well, this is the thing. It's like they have got Kay grounded when really she should have any and all authority. But what happens when you create somewhat these other personalities there to protect you? What happens if they kind of dictate your own free will? I mean, in a way, because it's like they're keeping Kay in there. And it's kind of what, you know, Byron Shelley said, like, oh, are they afraid of the girl? And I don't think they want Jane, the primary, the one that clearly they identify that Kay has such a bond with over any of the other ones, to interfere maybe even more. I feel like the symbolic aspect you can take out of Jane also having that little candy or mint, if you will, from the fog is Jane finally indulging in something that she wants, so to speak, because they were talking a lot about don't you want to express yourself kind of thing, do what you want to do and stuff, and Kay was just like yes. So I feel like in that moment when she had that, that was her taking that first step. Then we cut back to Rita and Laura de Mille, pissed out of their faces, and as Rita says, leave it up to me, and she gets in the time machine, guys. She freaking gets into it. World-renowned time traveler Rita Farr. She was practically kind of pushed into doing it through Madame Rouge saying, you know, that, you know, I've known you for less than 48 hours and that is definitely not who you are, so that just makes her want to do it even more. So to be honest, if anything, I'm kind of proud of Rita, because she had the courage to literally go in there by herself and travel back in time. You would have thought anyone would just be too afraid to do that, especially somebody who wants to be somewhat safe. I feel like Rita would just rather be left in Doom Manor where everything's clean, spick and span, tidy, and nothing too much is going on. But no, she's now taken a step into time travel where, for all she knows, she could be trapped there for a long time. So that's arguably the most, or I don't know if I want to say, she could have some Dutch courage, I suppose, but like, yeah, she's gone to travel back in time now, so I'm guessing next episode we could get a bunch of scenes with Rita back in time. This is how we get to see maybe more Brotherhood of Evil. Maybe she infiltrates the Brotherhood of Evil through pretending to look like Madame Rouge. There's all these kind of theories we can get into, but either way, the Brotherhood of Evil do know what she looks like at some point. After all, they did have the very photo to show Gargwax the Decimator. So yes, another very, very rambly review, but what a trippy episode. As I've already articulated, I'm just very happy with the introduction of the Sisterhood of Dada. I thought they were very compelling characters. The ambiguity surrounding them and their introduction just furthers my intrigue. On top of the intrigue I already have this season for characters such as Laura de Mille, how it all ties back to the film. We know Rita goes back into the past. What is left for the Brotherhood of Evil? What more of them have we got yet to come? So let me know your favorite moments of this episode. Let me know your theories down in the comments below. If you have any questions, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, for the writer Shoshana Sachi, please let me know them down in the comments below. Do keep them to episode 5 though. And other than that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you Doom Patrol members in the next video. Goodbye.